were having a meeting with some other people at a restaurant, and the bartender, as I recall, like jumped down my throat, said, "These bike lanes." I mean, people were upset about them, and you defended me. I mean, you said, "Do you know that this is where we're going? This is what we need." And I had no idea what you thought about bike lanes, but I appreciated you were defending me, because that was a daily conversation for me,
Welcome to Live Ready, Beyond Think and Grow Rich with your host, me, David Ibarra. And today we have a very special guest, our past mayor of Salt Lake City, Mayor Ralph Becker. Welcome, Mayor.
Thank you, David. Always good to be with you.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about what I'm anxious to talk about. In our program, Beyond Think and Grow Rich, and based on the success principles by Dr. Napoleon Hill, I like to pick out somebody that has lived a principle that has served them well. And when I'm thinking about the principle of purpose, your name just kept rising to the top. And I specifically am thinking in my mind, here is an individual that was a state representative for how many years, Ralph?
11 years.
11 years. You were Mr. Bowtie. I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
And known, and a quiet individual that served quietly and worked hard. And almost everyone I know says that about you, Ralph. And then there was a time period that, it's time for a new mayor. And you ran for mayor, and most people didn't expect that you were going to win. I think you were third or fourth place in the polls or what have you. You had a purpose. You were going to serve. Tell me about how that came about, that you decided to, one, be in service as a state representative, and then go on to serve the city. What was your thought process?
Well, I was raised with, inbred into all of us, really, was that we are fortunate. We owe something to our society and our community for that good fortune we've had, and we should give back. And all of us in different ways have embraced that. And for me, I think it was always in my mind. I worked seasonally and then a winter with the National Park Service, and I thought, this would be a cool career. Working in the national parks, living in national parks, all of that, and the mission. And life takes turns. I ended up not doing that, but I studied towards it. And I went to work for a consulting firm here, and it had me in touch with a lot of the leading Western political figures, governors in particular.
And what was the main area of expertise? What was your talent, skill in your practice?
Well, I trained to be an environmental lawyer and planner, became that, and I knew I wasn't a litigator. That takes a special orientation towards life, and I grew up in a family of lawyers, and I knew it wasn't me. So I focused on policy, the law as a great framework for everything that gets done in society, right? And I wanted to devote myself to public service. And even though I had my own business for over 20 years and it was successful, my orientation was always in that direction. And I had the incredible fortune of being asked to come and work with Governor Matheson. I know you remember. And
absolutely.
Was the model elected public servant. And so I, in a way, was mentored by him. I worked on what for him was his sort of special project as governor. He brought me on to work on that, and then my roles expanded a bit over time. But
what was that special project?
So Governor Matheson, the way he described himself before he became governor was he was a rocks and water lawyer. Okay, so his background was similar to mine in the kind of professional work and education we had. He lost a U.S. Supreme Court case trying to obtain lands that were owed to the state of Utah by the federal government. And it really angered him.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, we've got to do something about this. And he came up with an idea to take all of the state lands, which are scattered in 1 mile sections all over the state, over 3 million acres of land, and to exchange them with the federal government, and in exchange, get the state out of lands they shouldn't be in, national parks, for example, and have manageable blocks of land.
Right.
Well, that affects every public land user and use in the state of Utah, because these lands are scattered everywhere. They're uniform across the state. And there's so many different kinds of users. And he said, I want to see if we can do this. And he started it, and he asked me a little ways in if I would come in and coordinate it for him. And so I took that on, and I spent 3 years. That was my primary job with him. And because it was his sort of favorite thing, I could write an 18 single space memo to him, and we'd sit down for 2 or 3 hours and talk about it.
Wow.
I mean, so I had that interaction and got to know him and Norma and the family, Jim and Scott, and he just gave me a great opportunity and a great insight into how public service should work.
So not only did he have the purpose, because he had, any successful person that's going to be remembered has to be remembered for something. And normally it's the purpose. In his case, I did not know that it was his administration that pieced all of the land together, because individually in small parcels, it's not usable.
Yeah.
You can't put any
You're
kind
trapped.
of, you can't put anything together. And then the actions to do it, people can think of a dream, a hope, but to create a purpose with action items to achieve it, that's not really every day do you see it.
Right.
So that's very cool.
And he taught me sort of one thing that I carried throughout all of my public service. We'd be involved in some detailed policy discussion, that only people who are into it could get into. And people would talk about all these different dimensions and get into the politics of it. And he'd stop the conversation. He said, so what's in the best interest for the people of the state of Utah? He would always come back to that.
Right.
And if you think about whoever it is, if you're in public service and you're serving people, that's probably the essential question.
Well, and it may be a question that's not being asked anymore in our certainly federal. I mean, it seems like we're in this battle of team play, and we've gone from a kind sport to it seems like we're warring against each other, and it's not about what's best for everyday Americans or everyday. I think we're blessed in the state of Utah. There's no doubt about it. I mean, when we look at the best economy just about in our country for how many years in a row, 15 years in a row, that didn't happen on accident. That didn't happen. Tell me about how it was that you decided that you were going to say, okay, my purpose now is going to drift into the state legislature. How did that come about? And tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when Governor Matheson left, his successor, Governor Bangerter, asked me to stay on. I become the state planning coordinator for the state. And I did that for a few months and realized for me it just wasn't a good fit. His orientation, he was a really good person, but his orientation was very different. And
in other words, it wasn't a passion on the same things that you were working with, or the not emphasis, or
it was clear he was not going to continue to pursue this massive land exchange, and it was kind of mostly for political reasons. I get it, but he came out of a legislative background, and he was not, super educated guy, great guy, but his rule was anything you send to me, put it on one page.
Right.
Well, I wasn't used to working that way, I get it, but it was like, no, this stuff is more complex than that if you're going to be making decisions.
Right.
So anyway, I left. I started a business, and then I said, well, what can I do in the community? I had been involved in neighborhood stuff, and I ended up being on the Salt Lake City Planning Commission.
Mm-hmm.
And that kept me in the community and public service sort of orientation. And what led to the legislative stuff was I'd always identified political leaders who I liked and tried to support. So Frank Pignanelli was my representative.
Right.
And I liked Karen Shepard, and I went to go help her with her campaigns. And just sort of sporadically, but I knew nothing about real campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
But I was going to breakfast with Frank one day, and he said, "Ralph, I'm not going to run again. Are you interested in running for my seat? I think you'd be good at it, you know?"
Yeah.
And I had not really thought about it, but I thought about it. I asked my business partner, my wife. They said, "Yeah, if this is something you want to do, you know, we'll figure it out." And then he called me one day, and he said, "Ralph, the filing period is coming up. You've been through this. You know how this works.
Yeah.
The filing period is coming up in a week. You haven't gone down and filed. You need to go down and do it." And I went, "Oh, really?" I mean, that's how naive I was. So I was leaving for a work trip, like in 2 days, and would be gone through the remainder of the next week. And I went, "Well, I'll file, and then I can decide." Well, I filed, and I mean, I was so naive, David. I went to my neighborhood caucus meeting, you know, and I show up, and they pass out materials, right? Well, I was just showing up, right?
Right.
And my leading opponent, it turned out, was the second biggest contributor to the Democratic Party, and well-known and well-liked, Kent Nolley. Do you remember Kent?
Yes.
And anyway, he had this letter with a masthead with every prominent Democrat in the state supporting him.
Yeah.
Anyway, I went, you know what, I'm going to, that sort of got my competitive juices. I'm going to give this a try. And between then and the convention, I went, there's 75 delegates. I got to get to know them and got to tell them why I think I could serve well.
Right.
I ended up winning in convention. And so from that point forward, you know, I was in it. And I went, well, I don't know if I'm really going to like this or not. But it turned out I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt really rewarded by it. And once I was in elective office, in a way that I realized that there is a sort of authority that comes with a title and a power in some respects that comes with a title that allows you to do things you can't do as a citizen, even no matter, you know, activists serve a great role,
Right. Yeah,
but you can really do things as an elected official.
Yeah.
So that really
Government
kept me energized.
is a big part of any change, whether we, you know, some like it, some don't. That is the way that government was intended to be a part, but not the part.
Right. Government has its role.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, of your 10 years in the state legislature, what was your high points? What was like something you say, wow, that was cool? And maybe a low point.
Well, I will say that the low points in terms of watching what the legislature were doing far exceeded the high points. I mean, for a while I could be humored by it. You know, our sessions are 45 days. The first few weeks, you know, it was like, oh, well, you know, they're messing around and people are saying stupid things.
Right.
I wasn't excluded from that. But then when they actually started taking actions, it's like, really? The state of Utah is going to do this? So that was hard. The really strong points for me was the way that I looked at my service. We were in the minority. The minority doesn't set the agenda. Was that I had to look for opportunities to do things that I felt served my constituents well and where I could make a difference. And there were a couple of those. Utah was going through this huge growth. It was really we had this whole, everyone was saying, we got to deal with growth. You know, It was really the first time in my time here where that was happening. Well, that was my professional background. You know?
Right.
So I was able, and it was known among legislators and others. So I was brought right into the discussions with the leadership on the Republican side and helped shape what became the Quality Growth Act. And, you know, I worked on the overall stuff, but the LaRae McAllister Open Space Fund, which is still in existence, has saved probably hundreds of thousands of acres of land from development that should be preserved. You know, that was sort of a piece that I particularly worked on.
When you have got a specialized talent or skill, and you have a pleasing personality that you get along with people, it's amazing how many will have the good common sense to access your skill and to use it in harmony with a group to make a difference. And that's how great things happen. It won't happen if you're not in harmony. It won't happen if there's fighting or just bullying or what's going on. But you always had a reputation of never really, you would say what you thought. There was no doubt about it, but you could say what you thought without offending the other side of the aisle.
Well, I tried, and I certainly had to learn along the way. Mm-hmm. I ran some ethics legislation that angers almost everybody in the legislature. I said, well, you mean you don't think I'm ethical, right? Yeah. It's like, well, but I don't know if you should receive these huge gifts from lobbyists,
Right.
And that would really. So I'd run bills on stuff like that, and I had to learn. Some people would just be offended because you were doing something, and other people, if there was an approach that was taken that was respectful to them, mm-hmm. gave them notice to them if you knew they were particularly sensitive about something. Hey, here's what I'm going to do.
Right.
It's because I believe in it, and it may or may not be successful, but it made all the difference.
Yeah, all the difference.
Not with everybody.
Yeah.
There's some people, you're with me or not because you don't believe what I do, or
right.
or you're not supporting me enough, or whatever it may be. But I found that for me, as I learned it,
mm-hmm.
it made a huge difference, and I could maintain relationships where I had significant disagreements.
Right. Well, you go 10 years. And then somewhere, somehow, the thought had to enter your mind about a purpose change. I want to be mayor of Salt Lake City. Tell me a little bit about that process, and what was the thought? Who did you confide in? And when did you decide, and how did you go about it?
Well, that's when you and I first really got to know each mm-hmm. other a bit. And I had been serving in the legislature for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And when I looked at legislators, what I saw happen with 90% of legislators over time was that if they're there for a very long period of time, instead of focusing on their constituents, they get involved in the internal stuff of the legislature and their own power plays, their own sense of entitlement. It's different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they lost what I consider that edge. It's like, I'm here for a purpose that's not about me, it's about them.
Right.
And I could see that was starting to happen to me. And I went, you know what? I had an opportunity. You remember Paula Giulander just died?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And Paula was my senator. We were really close. And right at the beginning of a legislative session, she got sick. And she had to leave the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the Democratic leader in the House,
right.
the minority leader, and I literally, it was like, we got to fill that seat right away. Do you want it?
Right.
Because I was the natural person.
Right.
And so I looked at it and went, if I go over to the Senate, it's not just serving out her term or 4 years. You don't get things done quickly. It really is like an 8-year commitment if you can do it.
Right.
And I went, I shouldn't be in the legislature another 8 years. It's not maybe right for me, but I don't think I would do it justice.
Mm-hmm.
So my wheels had been spinning. I'd given a talk on Salt Lake City up at the university where I was asked to talk about Salt Lake City, and you and I love Salt Lake,
mm-hmm.
and it really got my wheels spinning. I'd been on the planning commission and obviously been involved in things, but what is it that works and doesn't work in Salt Lake City?
Right.
And how do we emphasize our attributes, and how do we strengthen the city?
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, in my first time running, it was the Great American City. I sort of developed that moniker, mm-hmm. which people laughed at,
mm-hmm.
and I get it,
Mm-hmm.
But I decided right then and there, it's like, I'm not going to serve in the legislature, but I'm in this elective office thing. Is there something else that I really would want to do? And I decided mayor. I said, first of all, I love this city. I think it has limitless potential.
And it's a place you get stuff done.
And you can get stuff done at a local level much more easily.
Right.
I mean, in that era, people worked together better, you know. But still, it was more manageable maybe in that respect, as you're describing. So I just decided, in fact, I told my delegates the last time they elected me, it's like, I probably will not serve out my term because I think I'm going to run. They still nominated me, you know. So that's really what did it. And then I had my own business. And, you know, that is a full-time endeavor.
Right. Right around the corner from here.
And I the person I thought was going to take over my business decided he didn't want to be an owner of a business.
Right.
You understand how that works. And so I decided, well, what I'm going to do, because I can't devote myself to this campaign properly and I'm going to sell the business. So I sold the business. I got enough money out of it to live for a year. And
you created some burning desire. Burn the ships. You're going to be successful in something different going forward.
Well, people would ask me, it's like, well, what are you going to do if you lose? And I go, well, then I'll do something else. You know, I mean, life takes turns, you know.
Right.
Anyway, so I decided I was going to devote myself full-time to a year for running for mayor. I helped with the transition in the business a bit through the early part of that. And I ran, and I was reaching out everywhere, including to you. And,
I can recall it just like yesterday.
I remember we were sitting across the table in your office, and at 7 o'clock in the morning, it's like, I like this guy. He gets up early like I do. And
I can tell you is that, you know, you always try to, I try to train myself that, you know, the accuracy of thought. You have to listen. And you have to shut off some of your preconceived beliefs and listen, or you're not going to have a good conclusion of the conversation. I remember you came in, and I was thinking, like, how is Ralph Becker going to win? And then I just listened, and I went from like third place to, I think it was right after I'm in.
You wrote a check that day.
Yeah, I did write a check that day. Take a moment and picture in your mind igniting your child's journey to lifelong success from an early age. With Yes, Our Kids Can, this vision becomes a reality right from preschool. Don't miss this chance to shape your child's path towards extraordinary success. Enroll in the Yes, Our Kids Can University now and witness the remarkable impact it can have on your child's growth and development. Secure your child's bright future today. Sign up now by clicking the link below.
Because it was like, whoa. Because, you know, when you're starting it, and I've made a commitment to my family, I'm not spending any of my personal money.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that much to spend anyway, but, you know. But no, it was, that was a very common question.
Well, I tell you what, you bring a common sense and a different tone to our city, and you know, a great American city. When you think of the cities in Salt Lake, you think of New York, you think of Los Angeles, you think of, you know, Boston, you think of, you know, you can think of a host of cities. Why not Salt Lake City? I mean, when people come here and they fly in and they look at our city and they look at the surroundings of the mountains everywhere, absolutely. A 2002 Winter Olympics. I mean, you got involved with changing an airport, if I recall, pretty heavily. Tell me a little bit about that process.
Well, so, you know, like everybody, I use the airport. That's about my level of knowledge, you know, and you think as a passenger you understand something, but you really don't. So I came into office, and weren't you on the airport board?
Yeah, appointed by you.
And
thank you.
And well, it's its own world.
Yeah,
airports are their own world, and that part I kind of understood. But you know, it's the Salt Lake City airport. Mm-hmm. What I didn't understand was it's not really Salt Lake City's airport. Mm-hmm. Delta Airlines is is the head of the, they're the
That's
biggest
right.
player. They provide the money through all of the different fees, and the decisions rest with them. And I had someone actually come and advise me early on, who had started with Western, and I think he had been president of Western and ended up becoming president or high level official. He was from Salt Lake, and he sort of explained to me how it worked.
Right.
That Salt Lake City has an important role to play, but that the airport decisions are the biggest decisions are made by Delta and the federal government, right?
Right.
I mean, you know
Exactly.
that from the airport board.
Most people don't realize is that brand new airport that you were a major architect in. Most of it was not paid by Salt Lake City or Utah.
Yeah,
it's paid by a passenger user fee for everyone who lands in Salt Lake and changes planes.
Right.
There's a fee.
Right. And then all the concession fees
Yes.
and the rental car fees and the parking fees. But the biggest is by far the passenger fee, which if you look carefully at your ticket, it's on there.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I came in, and Maureen Riley was the head of airports, who's incredibly capable person.
Absolutely.
And the other thing this person told me, I said, well, why, why is it Salt Lake City? You have you have authorities all over the place. He said, here's what Delta likes about having Salt Lake City. They can always go to the legislature if they don't like something Salt Lake City does. And I experienced this, as you remember.
Yeah.
And they can override whatever Salt Lake City does. So they've got that check, but it's easier to work with Salt Lake City than to try to work with the state, right? So anyway, Maureen was educating me.
Right.
And our airport was a mess.
And most people look at the airport. It was clean. It was fairly efficient. But what they didn't recognize at a 6.0 earthquake, it would be no more.
Right.
And if we lost an airport, what the effect that would make on our economy for the 4, 5, 6 years to build would have been unthinkable.
And they think I would affect the airlines.
Yeah.
And that was our kingpin. So Maureen and I strategized, and I started to develop a little bit of relationship with Ed Bastian, who's been the CEO for a long time of Delta now. But that time he was second, I think.
Right.
But he was responsible, and I think he had a place in Park City. So he was out here. So we started to develop a little relationship, and Maureen was brilliant, as you know. And she was particularly strong financially. I mean, we had $100 million in reserve for a rebuild, which is unheard of, right? And so she could almost do a lot.
Surplus is unheard of.
Right. Yeah, we just don't seem to think in those terms.
And that's common for Utah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Fiscally, I get why we're so successful fiscally. Right. Anyway, so Maureen and I just started talking about it, thinking about it, and she would work her angles, and Ed Bastian would take my call, or he would visit, but what we realized was going to convince them was the seismic risk.
Right.
Terminal 1 would fall down, the old Terminal 1. It was totally unreinforced. It was old, and so she started to develop it, and we went and we got Delta to buy into it. It was Delta.
And once Delta bought into it, done deal. Yeah. Done deal. And so a $3 billion project?
It's now $4
billion project.
Biggest
and we're not project. Hearing the kind of what in the world would the concourse be, because the tunnel that was always there is finally finished, so you have access as soon as and you don't hear what were you all thinking. But the airport was a major accomplishment in your administration. What would be a couple of others that you're really proud of in the 2 terms that you served?
Well, I'll mention a few, but let me first mention as it relates to the airport, because this is reflective, I think, of kind of the way I and we as a city tried to integrate things. So we're talking about the airport, and Maureen, the airport director, is saying, well, what we're going to do is we're going to stop light rail. We were planning to build light rail to the airport, at the edge of the airport, and then we're going to have the shuttle service that you see in all these other cities. And I just blew up, and I said, Maureen, That is so stupid. You're part of a surface transportation system. It's inconvenient for the passengers.
Right.
And it doesn't work well with the rest of the. So she finally said, all right, we'll do another study. And the study showed it would work. And so we ended up getting what we have today of airport going in, the light rail going into the airport. So other things. I mean, as you know, the way that I looked at my efforts in the city was that it was going to be comprehensive. Mm-hmm. That things tie together, that you don't work on transportation and not work on buildings. You don't work on buildings and transportation without looking at land use. You don't look at energy without looking at, how you can be more sustainable. You don't look at supporting local businesses.
Everything is connected.
Because they all connected. So that was my approach. The very first thing out of the chute, though, because when I came into office, I had these blueprints, remember?
Right.
And
you were the blueprint man.
Yeah, I was.
It was a cartoon character.
And, agreeing to that commercial was, you can imagine. It's like, really? It's like, well, what do I have to lose? Anyway, so as I was going through the transition, that you co-chair it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I was meeting with the department directors, the city attorney, Ed Rutan, who's really capable. And he said, Ralph, I've been looking at your blueprints, and we can get started right away. We can start with the domestic partnership registry, which gave domestic partners, regardless of orientation or whatever, when they proved their partnership, an ability to get benefits.
Right.
Whether it's insurance or being a hospital visits, whatever it may be. So he said, we can do that right away. I'll have an ordinance ready for you in a week. And I went, well, I guess we'll start there,
Yeah.
So as you know, we got that done.
Right.
I was told you are wasting your time. It's something that the council will never accept. The legislature will throw it out. We got that done. We fought back, managed to hold back being overridden by the legislature.
And presenting it that when you present things that it's the humane, loving thing to do, why would you prevent somebody from being able to visit their significant other if they're in a hospital because they're not considered? So it wasn't like it was some common sense things that would have been very difficult. The way you shaped it, it would be very difficult to say, no, that's not right.
Well, difficult for us, but not for some other.
Well, that's true.
Well, and then we took on the non-discrimination ordinance, which was a much bigger lift, and we realized it, and we spent a year developing that, both developing the stories around people who had been fired in their employment or lost their housing only because they were gay. That's what we called it then. And we developed a really strong case, and we got a lot of people's stories. And then we started working the policy angle, and we knew the LDS Church was a key. And during my campaign, I actually went to the church, the LDS Church, with these ideas. And I learned where their acceptability was.
Right.
And we worked within that realm. They don't believe in discrimination. They want to protect their institution.
Right.
They have doctrines, man and a woman marriage. But in that realm, it was conceivable.
Right.
So we worked through it and got that done, and then we were able to, again, keep the legislature from overriding it.
And the other things that were, you began to develop whether everybody agreed on it or not, how were we going to move within the city?
Yeah.
Was it going to be walkable? Was it going to be friendly? Was it going to be, bicycle friendly? And whether you agree or don't agree, you got it done.
Well,
what you wanted.
So I looked at it in a variety of areas. And to me, it's like which ones are most important. In each area, there are things we focused on that hopefully we got done. And around mobility, and I'll get to a conversation you and I that I was with you when we were over at a restaurant one night. But so to me, mobility means everyone can move safely and conveniently around the city.
Right.
And really, since World War II, our orientation has been towards providing for cars, which I get. We all enjoy driving.
Yeah.
But the streets weren't safe. They weren't safe for pedestrians. Rocky took that on, with his flags, and he got beat up over it, but it helped.
Yeah.
We definitely weren't safe for bikes. And when I ran for mayor the first time, I said, what do you want in the city? And the number of people who said, I want to be able to ride around with my bike safely in the city, and I can't do it. Well, I related to that because I've always ridden recreationally.
Yeah. Right.
Anyway, so we pursued a full agenda around multimodal transportation and providing for bikes and improving transit, still making sure cars had their both their place, but relative ease. We got big wide streets. This shouldn't be that hard. Anyway, so we pursued in every realm. We got the airport line done.
Right.
We got a Sugar streetcar line, which wasn't on an agenda for 30 years. Bike lanes initially were pretty easy. It's putting a stripe on a road until you get to separated bike lanes, which is ultimately what you want for safety reasons and security reasons.
And I think that's where we've been a bit lost. I don't know. I would venture to say that the majority of folks are not pleased, but they're not pleased with the bike lanes. They're not pleased with 3 types of bike lanes. It
gets confusing.
It gets confusing. It could have been, and some of the streets have just been, it's confusing.
Yeah.
It's difficult. But that came about, and I don't want to end because we're coming to an end here, but we better cover the conversation at the restaurant since you brought it up.
Oh, yes. So you and I were having a meeting with some other people at a restaurant, and the bartender, as I recall, jumped down my throat, said, these bike lanes, people were upset about them. And you defended me. You said, do you know that this is where we're going? This is what we need. And I had no idea what you thought about bike lanes, but I appreciated you were defending me because that was a daily conversation for me,
I could tell you this. I wasn't as enthusiastic about bike lanes as others, but enthusiastic enough to know it's our future, and it always should be involved. The only difference I would have had, and this is more than one administration, let one pick and let's stick with one type, and we don't need to change everybody's plan just to put your own fingerprints on it, because then it makes it confusing. But I don't want to end without talking about something that is incredibly special, and that is, in our lives we have roles that we hope we become successful at: family, faith, community, health, and enough wealth to be present in those other 4 roles fully with controlled attention. Tell us a little bit about your personal life and your special person that I wouldn't want to have a podcast without talking a little bit about Kate.
Yeah, well, I've been very fortunate in my life in a lot of ways. As I mentioned, I wasn't born. You are the model of not just rags to riches, but also in giving to a community with what you've been in the way you, and Mickey, your brother, the same. Whereas for me, I took those things for granted growing up. My education, stable family life. So I've always been lucky that way. But we go through changes personally, and I had a marriage for 25 years,
right,
and we had 2 great kids.
Right.
But things weren't working out, and it was time for both of us to go our separate ways, and we did. And my kids are both in Salt Lake, which I love. We're together with my son on Saturday, and one of my sons, the other one a few weeks ago. So I got really lucky. After I came into office, I'd been divorced and separated for 5 years. I got an email from someone I'd lost touch with for a long time, who I'd seen professionally years ago. But she always struck me as someone who was really cool.
Right.
And she said, hey, I'm in Washington, D.C. now. If you're ever here, give me a call if you want a cup of coffee. Well, next thing I knew, I was going to D.C. We connected. And from there on, she was in D.C. and we were back and forth for a few years, but we got together. And she She continues to light up my life, and I know she lights up everybody's life who's around her.
And what a good person, and definitely has the things that she believes in, and articulate and smarter than me and you.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But
And funny.
Yes, and funny, and speaks Spanish.
Yes, she is. She is. She's really fluent. It's wonderful for me, who can say cerveza. To be able to go with her.
Well, and I don't speak Spanish, as you know, so it was embarrassing when I go out. Who's going to translate it? And everybody looks at me, and I said, "Better be."
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to thank you very much for being on our program today. And as a gift, I want to give you a copy of my book, Live
thank you.
Ready, Beyond Think and Grow Rich.
Thank you.
And I want to ask everybody watching, we could go on and on and on, but I'd like you to subscribe to our channel and to think about the things that make you successful: thought, purpose, skills, action, and mindset. And do those things to get what you want. Thanks for being on our program.
Thank you, David. You're the model of all those traits.
Thank you.
Yeah.